Hey, you two. I like card games, and among them, Yu-Gi-Oh! Has always had a special place in my heart. I mean, there is no other card game that can take all of the action of a normal TCG, compress all of that into the space of 2 to 3 turns, and yet somehow still be able to have the level of complexity, the amount of interaction, and the amount of skill expression that you see in Yu-Gi-Oh! This game just hits different. And you'll see that a lot of the community really flocks to the game for that level of complexity. But I can't really pretend it's all sunshine and rainbows either. There are a lot of people who have been leaving the game lately because of the new direction that Konami's been taking with the game. There are some much more skilled and experienced players than me that I will leave in the description with their videos, speaking to why they're leaving, because I think they speak to those points eloquently. But what I want to do today is I want to use my card game brain rot to just say, hey, we have these problems, how do we fix the game? So buckle up while I take a look at some of the most frequently cited problems, along with a few that I've noticed on my own, and we're going to see, can we save Yu-Gi-Oh! In the year 2024? Issue 1, Non-Games. So, one of the major issues that Yu-Gi-Oh! Has been having lately is the rise of non-games. And by that, I mean games where nothing that you do matters. Essentially, no interaction can be had because one strategy relies on completely shutting down any interaction. In an ideal game of Yu-Gi-Oh!, the player going first will try to build up a defensive board, while their opponent uses hand traps to try and interrupt the construction of that defense. Then on the second turn, the player going second will go in, get in a good attack and try to murder their opponent, while the first player uses that defense to try and interrupt the attack. It's interactive, it's fun, there's a lot of strategy, and most importantly, knowledge of the game is key, because knowing the weakest point in the opponent's combo can let you really go ahead and weaken the attack or the defense as much as possible. But that isn't what happens nowadays. Tell me if any of this sounds familiar to you. You go into a game, you're really excited to build up a defensive board, but then your opponent plays Dimension Shifter, and the game is completely shut down because no one can access the grave anymore. It's awful. Or let's say you actually do manage to build up a cute board. You think, man, hey, I'm ready to put up a good defense and, see if I can stop the attack. Your opponent plays Sangen Summoning, and suddenly nothing you do matters because every single one of their monsters is suddenly unaffected by everything. That feels terrible. Or, let's bring it to the extreme. Let's say you're going up against Gimmick Puppet, they get to go first, and they play their field spell. All of a sudden, they get to kill you before you get a single turn, and none of your hand traps matter, because all of their cards are completely unaffected. It's awful, uninteractive, and doesn't lead to a healthy playstyle. Unfortunately, these are some of the most powerful strategies in Yu-Gi-Oh! Right now, and the only alternative are decks like Fiendsmith Snake Eye, where you will see cards that are able to get 3 or 4 effects out per card, depending on what you're dealing with. And I think one of the biggest culprits here are cards like Snake Eye Poplar. If I'm about to see some Snake Eye cards, I will commit murder. That card is able to summon itself onto the board when it is drawn. It is able to search a card for you. And if it goes to the grave, it's able to recur itself and bring itself back for more. Meanwhile, your hand traps can only stop one of those things. In other words, they're basically able to flood you with so many different effects that none of your hand traps matter. Well, that's not very interactive, is it now? And unfortunately, that's just the state of the game now. The best way to win is by ignoring the opponent. So how do we fix this then? Unfortunately, the only real way to fix this is to try and rein in a lot of the most problematic elements of Yu-Gi-Oh! And a lot of cards are going to have to go into a very ambitious ban list. At least 70 plus cards. Let's take a look at a few of them right now. I'm not going to do an exhaustive list, but at the very least, I can give you a few ideas as to a few main culprits who we might just have to take behind the bar. If we want to create a healthy ban list, there are 3 kinds of cards that we're probably going to have to address. The most obvious one are floodgates. These are cards that on their own are able to completely shut off a certain axis of play. Dimension Shifter shuts down the grave. Cards like Rivalry of Warlords, Gozen Match, There Can Be Only One, Skill Drain, all make it so that you cannot use a certain kind of monster. Eradicator Virus completely takes spells out of the game. Or Droll and Lockbird makes it so that any card that tries to be added to the hand no longer works anymore. It is untenable to have a game where you are able to use single cards to shut down entire playstyles. And so as a result, all of these are going to have to go. And even after these, we're going to have to even look into some of the weaker ones. The Fossil Dinosaur, Harpy's Featherstorm, Village of the Spellcasters, all of these are incredibly powerful floodgates that don't see the meta just because Yu-Gi-Oh! Keeps on releasing these things. So all of these, I'm afraid, are going to have to go into the bin. But that's only one side of the equation, because on top of the cards that stop people from playing, we also have to get rid of the cards that can play no matter what, as I like to call them. These are cards that will either make all of your cards unaffected, or that cannot be responded to in any way. Cards like Dark Ruler No More, Super Polymerization, Sangen Summoning, the Gimmick Puppet Field Spell, all read, your cards can't touch me when I do my thing. And unfortunately, that isn't exactly healthy for the game as a whole. So as a result, all of these, I'm afraid, they're also going in the bin. Then the last category of cards that I'm going to talk about are the cards that I call the do everything cards. We talked about Snake Eyes Poplar earlier, but there are more of them. And there are even more that are about to be released. Sharks are about to get a card that basically reads the exact same as Poplar. The Diabellstar engine is able to create 1-card combos based off of things like original Sinful Spoils. All of these cards that are able to extend into full combos on their own will have to go. Otherwise, hand traps which can only deal with 1 interaction at a time are just simply going to be outpaced, or they're going to have to be designed in a way that eventually turns into a floodgate situation. The bright side is, once you get rid of all 3 of these types of cards, I think you actually end up with a much more healthy game. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is best played when 1 interaction can deal with 1 card and vice versa. Or, if you have really powerful effects that can affect multiple targets, they can at the very least be interacted with. Things like Raigeki and Harpy's Feather Duster are really good examples of this, where they're able to destroy an entire board, but a single negate is all it takes to stop those powerful effects in their tracks. That is good card design that leads to a healthy metagame. Now, I'd like to say that's all we need to do, but you can see the length of this video. We've still got more to go. So without any further ado, let's go on to Issue 2! Archetypes and Identity. So, another one of the big issues that Yu-Gi-Oh! Has doesn't come from its gameplay, but rather comes from the fact that it has a flavor problem. And by that, I mean that one of the biggest draws for Yu-Gi-Oh! Is that you have a lot of different archetypes that are really good at drawing people into the game. For example, you'll have anime watchers who go, "Oh boy, I love Seto Kaiba, let's play Blue Eyes!" You'll have people who like the art, for example. They'll see things like the Centurions, cute girls in mecha. Who doesn't love that? You'll have people who love gameplay styles. For example, I love the Scareclaws. I think they're really thematically cool because you have a bunch of dogs that run as a pack and help out their alpha and make them stronger. And that is just a beautiful mix of storytelling and gameplay. It's genius, but there's a problem. Not every single deck is made equal, and you can see this really clearly when you look to the older archetypes. Look at things like, say, the Nordics, or even like popular anime decks, with the Cyber Dragon, Zane Truesdale's deck. People are hype about that, but the deck cannot compete against the modern deck. Put that against something like Tearlaments, it will get stomped. And that's where the problem comes. Not every deck can keep up because time goes on, and as a company, Yu-Gi-Oh! Has to make each new archetype better because no one will buy the packs unless they are strong. That's just a reality of the market. Now, Konami has been trying to fix this problem by using support for older archetypes. You'll see a new card or a new structure deck released that gives an old archetype some new love, and it will help it catch up to the modern age. But that is just a bit of a temporary solution, because as time goes on, you get more and more archetypes, and you will not have enough support available for all of them. You see this now, even, where things are just falling off the sides. So what do you do about this? Honestly, I don't really have much of an answer for that. As it stands, they've kind of put themselves into a corner, and it's a very uniquely Yu-Gi-Oh! Problem. Magic the Gathering has its 5 different colors. It may have different archetypes within the colors. For example, red can include things like Fireball and Burn, or it can include a bunch of goblins that run together. It's trying to be an aggressive, fast deck. Or, for example, you have things like Hearthstone, where you have classes like Hunter, but there is variance within it. Sometimes they want to play beasts, sometimes they want to use spells, but they still have the general game plan of wanting to punch their enemy in the face and do nothing else. And Yu-Gi-Oh! Doesn't have a baseline for all of its different archetypes, and as a result, people may flock to the archetypes, but then they'll get disappointed. Hunter will never get old. Red will never get old because they keep getting updated. Archetypes will get old. And that is the biggest problem that Yu-Gi-Oh! Is going to have to deal with. If you happen to have a solution, please put that right down in the comments below, because I'll be real, I've got nothing. Now, the other problem that Yu-Gi-Oh! Has when it comes to that sort of thing is the release of generic cards. There are a lot of cards that are really strong in the metagame that just don't belong to any deck because they can be made by basically any generic material. Baron de Fleur is still legal in Master Duel. It only requires a Synchro package that can get a level 10. You'll have things like Apollosa. You only need the ability to put 4 monsters into a link, and there you go. You've got one of the strongest negation tools in the game. There are so many more that I could talk about, like Crimson Dragon, for example, which will take things that are supposed to be archetype specific and remove all of their requirements by making it so that you only have to match their level. And by making cards more generic, and by making those generic cards more powerful, you remove the identity of every deck. One thing that I see constantly being said by my friends who are leaving Yu-Gi-Oh! Is that they feel that every single duel is samey. And honestly, can I blame them when they're coming up against a Baron Apollosa board on Master Duel? Or when they come up against something like a yet another package that goes into SP Little Knight? Because every single deck that can bring out 2 monsters brings out that same damn Link monster? No, I can't blame them. Because that's just the way that Yu-Gi-Oh! Is built right now. And unfortunately, for the more casual players, it leads to a really bad taste in the mouth. Because any deck will lead to the same end boards that lack true identity. Even decks like Blue Eyes, which are getting a whole lot of new support that are very distinctly within their archetype, still suffer from this. They may have a new Blue Eyes negate with the Magia monster, but they're also playing decks like Jack Atlas's Red Dragon Archfiend King Calamity. How does that make sense? It doesn't, but cards like Crimson Dragon and other generic enablers just make them all feel samey. And that's a problem. I do think that Konami has become aware of this. By banning cards like Baron de Fleur in the TCG, and with other cards kind of unofficially in the sights of Konami, like Beatrice, IP Masquerena, Apollosa, and more, I think we might see a healthier metagame come out of it, where each deck has its own identity. But, as it stands right now, we're not there yet. So, all I gotta say to that is, come on, Konami. We're waiting. But with that said, we're down to our last issue, which is... Issue 3. Ignoring the Community!
Did you just say something? Ignore me!
So this next one is really just Konami shooting themselves in the foot, because they just don't talk with their community. And this one comes from a really personal point of frustration here. Because did you know that until very recently, Konami did not actually say when their ban list would drop? So you would be caught by surprise about a ban list that dropped a few days ago, and no one announced it until Twitter came out and you could learn through that?
Open the door! Surprise, bitch!
Or did you know, for example, that Konami still does not explain why they ban things or what their philosophy is for the design of the game going forward, so you have no idea as to whether or not they're going to fix the game or make things better? And, making things even worse on top of that, people who have criticism about the game tend to get blacklisted by Konami. Some of the people who have the most love for the game and who have very, very genuine criticism, people like MBT, Farfa, they will speak their minds because they love the game and want to see it made better, and Konami will blacklist them for that. In fact, I've spoken about so many problems in this one video alone, I will probably not be able to do anything with Konami going forward. Not that I want to, I'm not exactly the kind of brand that's going to go with them, but you get the idea. They have to be willing to take the feedback, and not just take people who will be really excitable about the game and try to push more product. And that goes on top of another really big problem when it comes to Konami's communication. Konami does not actually let people act as ambassadors for the brand. The people who should be the most excited about the game get nothing for their deep participation. And by that, I mean the pros.
How can you do a thing like this? Build up a little boy's hopes and then smash all his dreams to pieces.
What do you think the reward for being some of the best in the world is? Either a playmat or a Nintendo Switch. Let's put it this way, you're paying thousands of dollars just to get there. Another $1,000 just for the best deck in the metagame currently. And you're telling me that you're gonna give them a playmat that's worth like 30 bucks or a Nintendo Switch? No. That is just a blatant, cheap move out when other card games are offering over $10,000 in some cases for their best players. It doesn't take much to make these people happy, and they will happily become the most excited people about the game, to give the guides for new players to have an easier way into the game, and be the people who you can put out as your faces of the game. And yet, the only people that we really know in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Community are the people who are also YouTubers. You don't know the people who just go there to be tournament players. In this case, I think that both of these can be really easily solved by just having Konami hire a community manager, and also just investing into their communications and into the image they want to present of their relationship with the players. Now, will they do this? I mean, it's Konami we're talking about. My money's on no. But, at the very least, we should probably get some sign of goodwill to show that A, they're listening to us when we have serious issues that are making people leave in droves, and B, that they're willing to actually grow a community based on the people who love it most. Because that's what makes for a successful game, in my eyes, and in many other games you'll see that. But time will tell. And for now, that does make the third and final issue, and so, it's the time to end this. If you enjoyed this, I urge you to come on by my stream. I will stream on Thursday and Friday at 7 o'clock Eastern on twitch.tv/CorvusVT, where I do duels for charity. Long story short, anyone is welcome to come by and challenge me, and if you manage to beat me, I donate $5 to charity. It's a good time for a good cause, and I highly urge you to come by. But until then, I'll see you all next time.